For a while now, I wanted my kitchen garden to feel a little more enclosed, a little softer, a little more layered, almost like a storybook cottage garden tucked away into my small backyard. So this week, I'm finally adding trellis panels around the raised beds to create that feeling. But before I can install them, I'll need to harvest a few crops, specifically the carrots, and prune back some of the greens so that I can make space for the garden to shift into this next season. A couple of weeks ago, I decided to add 2 trellis panels to one of my raised beds. This idea was born out of pure necessity. After my vacation, I came home to almost 12 foot of vine growing across the raised bed for my zucchini and for my watermelon. So I ran to the garden center, picked up a couple of panels, and popped them into the raised beds. But the moment that I did that, I was completely transfixed by the beauty that this little panel created in this corner. So I knew immediately that this is what I was missing. I have always wanted a storybook cottage kitchen garden feel, something a little more enclosed, layered, and intentional. Right now, my garden is at peak production. Everything's growing well, but I want the raised bed area to feel more immersive, almost like stepping into a little garden room. So I am harvesting some of my Nantes variety of carrots. Now, these probably could have stayed a little longer because these carrots are known to get upwards of 12 inches in length. But who doesn't love a baby carrot? I really wanted to make sure that I created some space here in the trellis so that the trellis can sit flush along the center of the raised bed. I wanted to make sure I had a little more room to work without crushing anything that I still wanted to keep growing. I always love this part of the season, pulling something from the soil that's been quietly growing underneath the surface. It always feels like the garden is just making a little more room for itself, letting one crop finish so something else can take shape. Swiss chard and kale had really started to spill into the pathways, so I pruned them back pretty hard along the outer edges. I still want them producing, but I need to reclaim the perimeter of the bed so I can actually get the panels in place and prepare the soil for the next season's crops. This kind of work always reminds me that a beautiful garden usually needs a little editing. Not everything gets to stay exactly where it started. Sometimes creating the feeling you want in the garden means cutting back healthy growth so the whole space can function better. Now, I know some of you may ask, well, do you compost? Trust me when I tell you, you would never add these greens to your compost pile. Those silly little white butterflies have put their eggs all over this kale while I was on vacation. And so I've completely had to cut them back and let them rebloom and refresh themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to sacrifice some things. The goal with these panels is to create more of an enclosure around the raised bed so that the kitchen garden feels less like a collection of separate boxes and more like a one cohesive space. I wanted to feel a little more tucked in, almost like the beds are forming the walls of a small cottage garden room. The arches already were in place and added height through the center of the space, but I'm hoping that the panels around the outer portion of the beds will help carry that feeling all the way around. Began to place the last set of trellis panels, I started to really take notice of the overall design elements of my raised beds. My raised beds are probably one of my most proud things, not only because me and my best friend and her son built those from scratch ourselves, but I've also loved the way that they've weathered over time. The coloration of the cedar wood is just beautiful to me. And so I've been really wondering, do I want the wood trellis panels to weather the way that my raised beds have? Or would I want to find a non-toxic black stain or paint to paint the trellises to match my arch trellis and my obelisk trellises? Let me know in the comments below if you are team keep them natural, keep them the same, and let them weather with grace, or if you're team B, which is paint them black, match your other arches and your trellises. That doesn't necessarily change what the garden produces, but it changes the experience of being in it, and sometimes that matters just as much. I've always loved cottage gardens that feel enclosed, layered, where the boundaries soften and everything starts to feel a little more immersive. Even though this is still very much a working kitchen garden, I wanted it to have some of that same feeling, productive but also beautiful enough to slow you down when you walk through it. Each panel went in, the whole space started to feel more defined, more like a room, more like the version of this garden I've been picturing in my head. It's still the same kitchen garden, but it feels different now. A little more enclosed, a little more intentional, and a little closer to the Storybook Cottage feeling I've been slowly building toward. I love projects like this because they remind me that a garden doesn't have to be finished, not all at once, for it to feel meaningful. Sometimes it's one small layer at a time, harvesting what's ready, cutting back what's overgrown, and making space for the next version of the garden to emerge. As always, thank you for sharing this moment with me in the soft seasons. I'm glad you found your way into the garden.